everyone. Tom Gillis. I'm the General Manager for Infrastructure and Security here at Cisco. I want to just take a few minutes and talk about my new gig. If you've ever heard me talk, I've always been the security person. About a year ago, I took on the infrastructure role too. Why? It's because this movement towards AI is really driving a need for integrated solutions, or what we call platforms. And I want to just share a little bit of some thinking on this. A platform, in my definition, is not just a bunch of products from a single salesperson. A platform is a system of systems. And as we move into this world, I'm going to call it the post-AI world. What an amazing world it is, right? The changes that are happening so rapidly, but it's causing us to rethink really the kind of basic building blocks of what a security system looks like and how those building blocks are built into the infrastructure. And I'm going to suggest that this post-AI world really needs a platform approach to security. Well, let me explain what I mean by this. So let's start with just thinking about the language that a security tool uses to understand and interpret an application. For decades, the way applications worked is they were a series of explicit programs that you'd apply towards a computer. It's kind of self-evident. And oftentimes, that computer came in a physical box. And so if you look at the most important security control in many of our tool chains, it's the firewall. And the primitives of a firewall, to this day, are still IP address, port, and protocol. And that IP address made perfect sense when a data center was built out of a box. And you could go in and you could touch the boxes. This one's the web server. This other one here, the big expensive one with the sun logo, that's the database. And it was the IP addresses that correlated to what the applications were. That's still the world we're living in today. Now, as we move into a world where AI applications are running, an AI application is non-deterministic, which means you're not explicitly programming a computer. The computer has the ability to reason, to solve problems on its own. And that's unbelievably powerful. We've all experienced this with ChatGPT, et cetera. But it means that the language that we use, the primitives that we use to understand, interpret, and supervise that application are changing. And you can't rely on any sort of static rules. In fact, what we need to do is we need to look at the interaction between a user and the prompt, or increasingly between an agent and either another agent or the application itself. So agent to agent or an agent to app communication is happening, and we need to be able to look at that and apply judgment to it. Does this look right? Does this make sense? And of course, the only way to do that is to use AI to supervise the AI. And that's what AI defense is from Cisco. So we're building very purpose-built small models that are targeted at understanding normal interaction between a user and a prompt, or between an agent and a prompt, and then saying, this looks like something that's stepping outside of those guardrails. So we're building AI awareness into your traditional security tools like a firewall. So this is something you can buy from us as a separate product, but I think it's much more interesting when it's built into our SSE solution, which is secure access, or when it's built into our hybrid mesh firewall, so that it naturally is intercepting and understanding that traffic between either the user and the prompt, or between the agent and the application, or the application to application. So the AI awareness is being built into the network security. Now, if you've been listening to Cisco Narrative, I think it was 2 years ago, we came in and we talked about how we're taking the network security and we're infusing that into the fabric of the network itself. So with Hypershield and our smart switch architecture, we're building that security capability into the very fabric of the network. And this isn't just a cut and paste of traditional firewall into a different form factor. It allows us to reimagine how network security would work, because you can put little tiny baby enforcement point everywhere. Every switch port, every service that runs in an application gets its own little miniature perimeter. So we put the AI awareness into the network security, we put the network security into the network fabric. But there's one more leap here, which is as you start to understand the power of AI infrastructure, the servers that are running these AI applications, they look nothing like the servers that run either a Kubernetes or VM-based applications. These are massive parallel arrays that are driven by GPUs, and the GPUs need to talk directly to other GPUs. And this is what we call a back-end network. The network, the Ethernet, becomes the fabric that you use to compose a system. And it's kind of like the role that the PCI bus used to play in a server. So the AI awareness goes into the network security goes into the network fabric, and we're bringing that network fabric right into the compute complex with all this AI networking. And that is the platform effect. Now, the final piece of the puzzle is that we instrument all of these different pieces to gather telemetry as efficiently as possible and put it into Splunk for both observability and for security. And this is why I'll argue that a platform approach is so important in this post-AI world. So I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues. We're going to talk in more detail about the individual components that make up this system. Thanks very much for listening, and I'll be here in the back to answer any questions. Peter?
Great.
Thanks, buddy.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate it. Hey, everybody. How's it going? Good? Good show? Doing well? Okay, great. So this is my first Cisco Live EMEA. So I joined about 10 months ago to lead the security business working for Tom. And I hit the Cisco Live US, but this is first EMEA. And so just in the meetings I've been in, obviously lots of talk about AI. That's partially our fault too, because we're talking about it a lot. The other thing I'm hearing a lot about, not a surprise, is also about sovereignty. And so today, I'm not going to go deeply into sovereignty, but I wanted to hit it because I know it's on a lot of people's minds. And I'll just sort of say, on behalf of kind of Cisco writ large, we are working towards sovereign solutions to meet all those needs. And in security, that's the case too. And so excited to meet with folks separately around, things you're thinking about. But I just wanted to kind of make that note up front because that's something I'm not going to talk about deeply today, and I know it's on a lot of folks' minds. Okay, so we heard from G2 this morning the framing of how we think about what we are doing as Cisco. So we are prepared for this moment, we've been preparing for this moment, this AI moment where we believe we have really unique capabilities to be the critical infrastructure provider for this AI era. And we've organized ourselves around three, what we think of as end user use cases. And fundamentally, it's AI-ready data centers. Tom was just talking about that a little bit, where how are we going to serve up these applications and deliver them at scale, right? Or future-proof workplaces, the networks we're building, the ability to access applications, and access applications that are running AI in the background, which require low latency. And finally, digital resilience. And so what is digital resilience? It's the ability to recover very quickly from an attack. And so hopefully, as we're engaging these AI capabilities, we're actually building better resilience, smarter resilience over time. And as we'll talk about in a little bit, the AI attacks are something we're quite worried about, and we've got to stay ahead of that to ensure that digital resilience is part of the equation. So I was going to start off with the agents are coming, and I changed the slide to the agents are here. And so just listen, by a show of hands, I'm going to ask two quick questions. So first of all, how many folks in the room either have security in their title and/or are living in an organization that owns part of the security problem? Can I show of hands? Okay. And how many people are in an organization today, in a company, that is either using agents internally or trying to build them or doing software development using agents? Okay, so I'd say maybe 25% in both cases. So the agentic revolution is happening now. So whether it's software development, right? We know that it's being broadly adopted now. It's in your browser, or maybe it will be very soon if you look at the Chrome browser as an example. And we're now seeing commercial use or consumer use cases like OpenClaw. For those of you who saw that in the news a couple weeks ago, this was kind of the first broad case of a truly proficient assistant that you could leverage, and folks were obviously building different use cases for that, and there were social networks built and all of this, but it really sort of began proving out in real time that these agents can be incredibly powerful. And so for the first time, we're starting to see this idea of this digital workforce come together. What began as sort of something we've been talking about as an idea is starting to actually come into focus. And the next version of this is going to be physical, right? Robots, what have you. And so we're the beginning of this explosion of the digital workforce. And with that, we are seeing changing environments on the ground. So first of all, changing workloads, right? And these workloads that might be are going to be living in Kubernetes, and you may not have visibility into those workloads, into what's going on, at the process level, what's trying to talk to those workloads. And so we need new tools to be able to get that visibility from a security perspective. In addition, you're talking about models that are non-deterministic by nature. And so we don't know for sure what's going to come out of those models. And so we want to be able to put guardrails around that. So we've got these changing conditions that require us to react and respond. And from a workforce or workplace perspective, again, smart devices, robots that might be controlled remotely by some kind of AI. Surgical robots, we know for sure, are going to start using AI as a tool set, alongside the doctor to deliver surgery remotely. And so, again, these emerging use cases are requiring different things from infrastructure, different considerations on latency, but also how we think about security. And finally, if we think about the data that is emerging as a result of this, this is 10x, 100x, 1000x, several orders of magnitude more data that's going to be being produced as a result. And so data is super helpful for training models. We can take advantage of that, and we're going to talk about that here in a little bit. But it also represents this expanded attack surface. And so we've got to be able to analyze that data and understand at scale what it means in terms of the security risks. And so this comes to, the kind of opening premise I want to provide you is that, fundamentally this AI era means we must lay down a new foundation for security. And that has implications from infra to network security, to how we think about securing workloads, to identity, and also the analytics layer that we are going to talk about. And obviously, we believe Cisco really has an important role to play here. So a couple of new areas that we've been investing in I want to talk about to kind of kick us off. And it covers agentic identity, which is going to become a very important concept going forward from a security perspective. Also about how we're securing AI workloads, and then analytics at scale. Let's start with agentic identity. So in order for you to have an agent operate in your environment as a company, or to talk to your application or your data source, or an external agent trying to talk to an internal agent, we want to think about agents having identities. So we know what it is, what it's supposed to do, what it's allowed to do, and what it should not do effectively, right? And tying identity to that means we can put all sorts of other parameters around that to define what the agent should be and should not be doing. And over time, we want to continuously assess what that agent is doing, and ultimately look at behavior and be able to make changes based upon that behavior. And so some of the technology we are building now looks at discovery, looks at authenticating an agent, but also authorizing an agent in terms of what it can do. From an AI workload perspective, I mentioned before, I'll say it this way, 2 years ago, talking to CISOs, I would ask the question of, hey, what are you doing for Kubernetes, right? Which is where AI workloads live, right? OpenAI is all Kubernetes based. And you get the, hey, that's, really kind of in this cloud security section, and, we're not really 100% focused. We're doing CNAPP, CSPM, and anyway, I'll make the story short. Today, it's like, yes, please, we need visibility. We need control over those environments. We need to understand what we have to do. And so Kubernetes is kind of a black box, but there's new technologies that folks at Cisco have developed that allow you to get that visibility and drive security policy inside of those workloads. And the models themselves, as AI workloads, also represent a new security problem. As I said before, they're non-deterministic. They're also subject to attacks. The data that we look at all the time is that these models can still, even now, be easily jailbroken. They can ingest data that's been, quote unquote, poisoned, right? And so the models themselves need protecting to be safely deployed. And so one of the innovations we're announcing at this conference is that Cisco AI Defense, which protects models, puts guardrails on models, in fact, now is also protecting agents and ensuring agents themselves aren't poisoned or bad things happen to those agents so they can be safely deployed in your organization. So very cool innovation. We'll get into more detail on it a little bit. And finally, the Cisco Data Fabric. With this explosion of data, we have to have the analytic tools. And really, because there's so much data, we want to make these tools as turnkey as possible. And we want to be able to use that data to train AI against that so we can start thinking more preventively about how to prevent attacks, what's going to happen next. Can I actually do attack path mapping and start anticipating where my weak spots are? And we want to ultimately be able to do it in a way that's highly efficient. So if you bring everything back to the center, into a single corpus, that is wonderful if you're doing incident response and all that good stuff, but it's very expensive. So we also want to go to where the data lives. And so federated analysis of the data is another capability we're introducing. And so we are taking this data problem/opportunity head on and believe we have some incredible capabilities there thanks to our brethren at Splunk. I think we're also different in that we take a very open approach. First, we think about our world as an ecosystem. We have to play nice with everybody, and so we are open by design. And as the security industry, for those folks who operate in security, we've seen this platformization trend. And platforms are good in some sense because it means you've got a simpler user experience and integration, but it also can mean a walled garden. Some of our competitors will charge you to take data and go put it on another platform. And so we just want to make the statement that we are incredibly focused on being an open company, but also provide open platforms. And Splunk, as an example, was the original founders of OTel, which is an open telemetry standard, as well as OCSF, which is a standard schema for doing security operations analysis. We also have a lot of support for open source initiatives within Cisco. And so a few examples, Talos, which has been contributing to Snort for, I think it's been over a dozen years since Talos has really taken ownership of that. Isovalent, which is the original founders of Cilium, which is, if you think about Isovalent as the enterprise version of what Cilium provides, which is an open source package to provide that eBPF capabilities in Linux. And then the Foundation AI team, which a lot of you folks may have not interacted with yet, but we have these amazing group of AI researchers, just brilliant. And they now have the leading open source security LLM model on the market in terms of downloads, in terms of performance. These are models we are using to power our products, but they're also models that we're making available to the community to make all of security better. And again, these are things we just feel like are incredibly important for us as a company, but also for the community. Security at the end of the day is a team sport because it's a very big and thorny problem set. So one of the partnerships, I want to kind of maybe swerve to the right a little bit for a second. One of the partnerships that we are very excited about that is also in the context of emerging AI attacks and the things we need to do different is a partnership between our Talos teams and our Isovalent teams, as well as with our security and trust folks internally. And it's called Live Protect. For those who have watched some of the more recent attacks on critical infrastructure, Volt Typhoon and Salt Typhoon were these big moments, right, for telecom and critical infrastructure, where we have these very pervasive, very serious attacks against infrastructure that were happening over the course of several years, and we didn't really detect them for a long time. Before that, you had Colonial Pipeline back in 2021, and that was sort of the first headline attack on infrastructure. And so the theme here is that this is not going away. So infrastructure is now under attack, and we have to start thinking differently about how we defend that and how we secure that. But the problem is, if we think about the world we live in Cisco, is that infrastructure is not getting updated that often. A patch waits for a change window that may not happen for 6 months. We have some customers who wait a lot longer to update and upgrade infrastructure. And in a world where no one's targeting that, that's fine. But in a world where folks are targeting this infrastructure, it's a problem. And so how do we do something about that? Because applying patches is hard. And we're going to work to make that easier and easier and easier, but there's another way. And so this is really what Live Protect's all about. So that eBPF technology, which I mentioned from Isovalent, think about it's an agent sitting on Linux. We have our own version of Linux running in our products. And it allows you to do things to sort of interrupt what might be a vulnerability on the product. So let me say it, I'm fumbling my words, let me say it differently. So we see a vulnerability. What's going to happen today is we're going to see, once that's been publicly announced, within hours, if not minutes, an exploit will be developed. And that exploit can be used by an attacker to go and attack that equipment, right? What we can do with eBPF is we can create a shield and push that shield down to protect against that specific vector. And that shield can be in place until a patch is delivered and you have time to actually go out and swap out and update that patch. And so what that does is it collapses what we think of as this defense velocity gap. And so this is just one way that we think we have to start defending infrastructure in a bigger way, because these AI attacks have really changed the time scale, if you will, for how fast vulnerabilities are going to be taken advantage of. So this is super cool, and you're going to start seeing this from us this summer. So much like AI is only as good as the data it's trained on, and the more data, the better, right? AI gets better with larger data sets and better data sets. Security is only as good as the context and the control surface you have. What do I mean by that? So in security, context is almost everything. And think about it. We see, a call coming into the network. It's coming from this IP. It's going to this IP. Traffic's encrypted. Hard to understand what's going on. Well, if I know my IP is associated with a crown jewel, that's context, right? If I know what asset it's going after, that's context. If I know identity of where it's coming from, where it's going to, that's context. If I can see the actual runtime behavior, the process it's trying to kick off, that is context. And so by putting those pieces together, that's how we can find things that are bad, which may not be obvious upon first glance. So context is really important. By the way, super important for also AI models as well. We'll talk about that again here in a little bit. On the other vector is the control surface. What is the control I have that allows me to see the thing? So we have endpoint controls, right? We've got firewalls, zone firewalls, perimeter firewalls, seeing north-south. We have runtime agents, right? So these are the controls we've got. And what I would posit for you is that if you have visibility everywhere and controls everywhere, this is how we would sort of get into this philosophical world of zero trust, where zero trust means assume breach, assume you have bad people on the network, and be able to protect yourself, right? And more, as we look at what AI attacks are going to bring to us, being able to attack our weak spots at machine speed, we have to be thinking about how do we, as an industry, as a society, really start getting to more of this zero trust reality. Because each of these controls will give you a piece of the puzzle. The modern CISO has to thread together 60, 70, 80 controls and literally stitch these things together and pull all that data back and try to make sense of it. And the reality is there's gaps in between. These are blind spots in between the tools themselves, the controls themselves. You might see, you have visibility in the posture of a host, but you don't have visibility in the rest of the distributed attack. You might see something at the endpoint, but you don't see anything anywhere else, right? And so we rely upon stitching these things together to do analysis and drive to security outcomes. That's hard, and it's nearly impossible to do without still having blind spots. So how do we overcome that? So in the AI era, we would suggest, and I believe, that you're going to need visibility and enforcement everywhere. Well, guess what else is everywhere? What is pervasive, right? The network is pervasive. Everything runs across the network. And I say that because I believe that Cisco has an incredible opportunity as we're approaching this next phase of attacks based on AI, that we have a much more important role to play based upon the visibility and infrastructure we have in place and the security we can provide on top of that. And that's obviously what we're building. So what's the first thing you need to kind of help solve that problem? Well, first thing you need is visibility. We talked about that. Sensors and controls. And so we have something called hybrid mesh firewall. What's hybrid mesh firewall? In the development of the firewall industry, you had the original firewalls, zone firewalls, then you had layer 7, next generation firewalls. Well, hybrid mesh firewall is the idea that you have all these sensors and enforcement points, and you can operate them as a system together. And so if you think about having some perimeter firewalls or zone firewalls or virtual firewalls in the cloud, or having thousands upon thousands of agents protecting workloads, being able to manage those as a system, right? And in this world where things are getting much more distributed, many more workloads we have to worry about, et cetera, we have to be thinking about how to manage things as a system, and that's hybrid mesh firewall. Cisco is thinking about this in terms of making hybrid mesh firewalls also AI ready. So we provide deep visibility into AI in terms of agents and models. We have a library of all the existing models that are out there that we can detect on the network. We can do semantic inspections we talked about using AI defense, where we can look actually the calls going to and from MCP servers. We can go beyond AI-driven detection, or beyond signatures rather, and actually look at data on each end, where we've got our encrypted visibility engine that actually can put together signal on both ends, even with encrypted traffic. We also are doing things with agentic ops, which allow you to more proactively drive policy. And we're making policy creation more simple with intent-based policy creation. So in the world of firewalls, as we know, writing rules across a large infrastructure gets very, very complicated. If we could start thinking about intent and enforcing that across an entire network of firewalls, that's a simplification opportunity. And so Cisco has a wonderful range of firewalls, right? From traditional on-prem firewalls to virtual to SaaS. We now have smart switches where we're actually putting security content in the smart switch. I'll talk more about that in a second, as well as the ability to protect workloads through agents. And that's all managed through security cloud control. Think platform. Again, a more simplified, integrated experience where we can write policy once and express it everywhere. And that includes third-party firewalls too, because we know we're not going to be the only vendor in the network. And so if we can unify policy and express it everywhere, that becomes far easier to manage. And then if we can analyze that and update that as drift happens and policies get out of date, that is how we can start managing these much larger networks that need to have enforcement everywhere, okay? So I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about our traditional firewall, our secure firewall family. We've refreshed the entire line, and in the last quarter, introduced the 200, as well as the 6100 at the high end. And the 6100 in particular has bananas scale. So you can literally tether 16 of these together, which allows you to ingest and inspect, like deep packet inspection, 8 terabytes, which is incredibly, it's a crazy amount. All the while, it's got a smaller rack space size than the competitors substantially, so smaller footprint, much lower power consumption, and so from a price performance perspective, it's just a killer product. So for those of you who play at the high end, we'd love for you to look at the 6100. It's a fabulous product. I talked about smart switches, and I think you heard about this morning too from G2. So the smart switches, here's the idea, is that we have a switch fabric. And the first one we've done is the Nexus data center switch, where we have really 2 personalities in the switch. You've got the networking personality, and then you have a separate processor, the DPU, that is the security personality. And so Hypershield is the software that we put on that switch. The initial use cases are rolling out now, which give you east-west visibility into that environment, as well as ability to do segmentation, which was formerly a blind spot. So you're going to see more content coming out on that, but we're very excited about the opportunity to put software into data center switches, campus switches, and beyond to get that visibility and provide east-west and microsegmentation type functionality. And I talked about isovalent and what we can do with workloads. We have 2 incredible products that allow you to secure workloads. Secure workloads, as well as the isovalent eBPF agent. And so this gives you both visibility, as well as ability to apply policy at the kernel level. And that's what you need to be able to do is to secure those workloads, secure Kubernetes, et cetera. And so, as I said before, and I'm going to bring someone up here on the stage in a moment, security cloud control is the security team's approach to platform. And really the vision here is what we want is our customers to be able to log into security cloud control, and everything they need to do, they can manage from that interface, and those experiences are highly integrated. So we can start thinking about driving policy across an entire fabric of switches and agents and what have you. And so to tell us more about that, I'm going to get my good friend Rick Miles up here to take us through some more about security cloud control. Rick.
Awesome. All right. Thank you, Peter. All right, so I'm really excited to talk to the team here about a bit in next level detail what we're doing in security cloud control. And if you think about what Peter was describing, I could just start drawing that architecture. You've got a branch edge where there's a security device and a control point. You've got a campus that might have firewalls. You've got east-west visibility where you've got yet another solution. You're in the cloud, and most customers aren't just in one cloud service. You're in a multi-cloud situation, each one bringing its own security stack. We haven't even talked about the data center yet. You've got data center edge, you've got ingress, egress at each of these levels, then zones, and then blind spots, as Peter talked about, all the way down into that east-west traffic. And man, I'm going to steal a quote from a CISO I was talking to last week. He's like, I don't want to talk about the 177th tool because I got 166 today, or 76 today. It's just overwhelming. And even in that architecture I'm describing there, that could be 7, 8 different security technologies that don't communicate with one another, that don't share data, that have those blind spots, right? That is an operational burden. And so, as mentioned, that's security cloud control, how we're pulling all of these control points together, and importantly, extending it into third parties, as Peter mentioned, which is very differentiating. That is our open approach into the market. And now I wanted to jump right into the product. So this is not Figma. This is in the product, a demo just showing the power of intent-based policy. Now, showing the power of intent-based policy isn't the most exciting demo. It's actually rather boring, but when you talk about policy, being boring is a very good thing. Being simple and not complicated, that's that ultimate goal. So if we go into security cloud control, we can create a policy here. And then if you're familiar with secure access, this will look very familiar to you. We're just allow, in this situation, this is HR to an ERP application. That's all. We're just going to say we want to allow that access, right? So we go ahead, we say, put that intent into the system. Let's add discovered targets. Now, what's happening behind the scenes is, it's actually quite magical. It's pretty exciting, is we're going out and discovering, okay, where should that policy be deployed to? At what boundaries? You think through all of those things I described, where are you actually putting that policy? So as it goes through and it does this discovery, it then can highlight the exact 3 places where that policy would need to change. So what it's doing, it's ingesting, it's understanding, it's optimizing, and then with one click, it's then deploying that policy to, in this situation, your cloud edge, the DC edge firewall, that zone-based firewall, to meet that intent. Now, what's even better about this is what I just demonstrated actually behind the scenes is a Fortinet firewall, a Cisco firewall, and a Palo Alto firewall. So you can think from an admin's perspective. Let's put that in real-world scenario. I did not have to go into Panorama and figure out what that policy should look like. I did not have to go into the FortiManager, the firewall management experience and security cloud control, understand each thing calls applications different things. Each thing has different objects. All of that abstracted away. I just wrote an intent. I said deploy the policy. Security cloud control and our mesh policy engine figured out exactly where that needed to get pushed to, and then deployed that across. So a really powerful use case that can drive that. Importantly, too, is that allows us to meet organizations where they are in their security journey. We can start to add value and help you along that path to achieve a better state of segmentation. Now, adding on to that, and as you heard this morning, a bit about agentic operations broadly at Cisco, I wanted to highlight a little more detail on what we're doing in the security space here as well. Now, inside Security Cloud Control, we have our new agentic ops capabilities. And the 2 that I want to talk through are zero trust access policy creation, and then I'll talk about VPN capacity and elephant flow as well. But imagine having to go down that zero trust journey. I talked to a lot of customers. I was actually with a customer a couple of years ago. It's like, hey, we've adopted a security services edge, a private access solution. We've achieved zero trust, plant the flag, we're good. And then you look at the policy, it's star.star/any, wide open. And then they're hit with hundreds of thousands of FQDNs. What should these policies actually be? It can be overwhelming. And then you get stuck in this place of, how do we actually achieve a better state of zero trust? So one of the things we're doing here with this first zero trust access policy creation is we're looking at the identity intelligence that we're pulling in. the user information, the risk. We're looking at what we can see on the applications. We're also looking at what the remote access VPN connectivity is that's in your organization. And this behind the scenes is going through and discovering, hey, what are meaningful least privileged access policies that we should create in secure access? So our ZTNA or our security services edge into that private access solution. And so with a click of a button, you take that discovered policy, it actually goes through, it creates that policy within secure access based on the access it has across the platform, and you can watch it, you can verify it, humans in the loop, and then deploy that policy. So again, helping customers in a proactive way down that journey. And then some of these other pieces, it's when you think about capacity planning, elephant flow, or these types of things as well, they don't sound super glamorous, but when you get a call at 2 in the morning because something went wrong, that's a terrible situation, right? And so what we're doing here is we're taking, I'm going to call Foster out if he's in the audience, one of our best tech people, right? We're taking these experts in the technology and we're adding them to your team. And we're having them leverage the strength of what they can see for us across all of those, the attack cases, the information there, your environment, learning, and building proactive recommendations for changes you can make so you never have that call at 2 in the morning. Right? It's essentially like a workforce building and enabling your team. So there's a lot more. We've got about 40 other use cases and counting that we're continuing to build into the platform here that I'm really excited about. Now, the next thing I want to talk about is Splunk. I figured I'd just show a slide that said free ingest in Splunk, drop a mic and walk off. But no, there is fine print. Restrictions may apply. But I am very excited about this. If you did not know, there's a level of free ingest if you're a Cisco Firewall customer and a Splunk customer. But it gets even better than that. It's not just that incentive. We've built new detections. We've built new experiences within Splunk, a better overall solution when you join these things together. And then we're also building better architectures. So imagine a scenario where, shoot, I don't need to send all of my logs. I don't need to share those because I actually have my persona in Splunk. They can reach into security cloud control. They can access the intelligence they need. They can do their job without me driving that ingest up through the roof. So better architectures that we're building out, partnering together here as well. So a lot of exciting stuff that I've talked through. I invite Peter back on stage here to take us a bit more through security for AI. Thank you.
Thanks, Rick. Appreciate it, bud. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you, Rick. Okay. So we talked about zero trust before, concepts of zero trust, the idea that a breach is happening. How do I secure my environment? How do I live in that world? And so these are really important concepts you must think about to achieve zero trust. So this idea of identity for all, so not just identity for people, but also for things and also for agents. Least privileged access, so that when you're providing access to a thing or an agent, you're always going to provide the very least privilege you can, as opposed to maximum privileges. You know, if you have a flat network where you log into it and I can go hit, you know, the ERP system, whatever I might want, that's bad, right? So least privilege is a concept around identity where we want to grant only the access we need to. Having visibility everywhere. We've talked about that. Workload visibility across the network, et cetera. Enforcement everywhere, as we talked about with hybrid mesh firewall. We're also going to talk about things like behavior monitoring. So in the world of agentic, like with the human, you don't just want to authenticate and authorize that thing or human or whatever to come to your network. You want to see what it's doing. And so we have a lot of tools around insider risk today to see, you know, who's doing what on the network. Should they be doing that? Well, we're going to need the same thing for agents. And semantic inspection is another way to talk about, you know, looking at the actual activity. In this case, an agent making a request of an MCP server. You know, what is it trying to request? Should it be allowed to do that? And then finally, all of this having to operate at machine speed. And this is the tough one, right? Because in our current world with humans, we've got a little bit more time. But these agents we know, and we've started seeing these end-to-end agents attacks. They can get in a network, they can go everywhere all at once, they can find your blind spots, and they can take advantage of you. So we have to start thinking about how do we put these defenses in place at machine speed. And so Cisco has a leading product providing zero trust access. This is secure access you might have heard about. This allows you for people to access applications that might be private or in the cloud or SaaS, but also because we own the plumbing, to provide the best connection experience possible, to understand whether you should route locally or route through the cloud. And because we're also integrated tightly with our SD-WAN product, we can also assure that connection experience and optimize for it. With AI defense, you think about securing models and agents. With secure access, think about actually securing the interactions we're seeing on the network. And so secure access is, the zero trust access platform with Cisco. And what we've introduced is this agentic capability, to be able to discover and look at MCP calls that agents might be making, to measure that against threat versus an intent, and ultimately to log what's happening, because ultimately we have to get data back so we can take action. And so this is just the beginning of Cisco starting to secure agentic activity on the network. Cisco also has the leading SD-WAN product in the market, which we're very, very proud of. And I think as G2 mentioned this morning, we're introducing agentic capabilities here too, where we can look at traffic and see what is AI traffic and classify that, and then optimize that traffic. Why is that important? Well, we talked before about some use cases of the remote AI, workload, application, what have you, trying to control a robot on the floor. If we have too much latency, we know that that's going to go bad. Maybe the better example, one we're probably all worried about, is that surgical example, where you have a remote surgeon also using AI to actually perform surgery with a robot. And so latency in a lot of these applications becomes a huge issue. So our ability to classify that and prioritize that traffic is incredibly important, and SD-WAN can do that now as well. And finally, as you bring these things together, SD-WAN and a secure services edge, secure access in our case, you get what's called SASE. And so we're seeing the convergence of network and of access controls coming together. And that's a simplification opportunity, right? We want to bring these things together to make them simpler, to drive policy across all of them, to deploy them, to manage them. And so we believe Cisco is uniquely positioned because of our strength in SD-WAN and because of our strength in secure access to really do very well in this market. And this is a great example of how we're infusing security and network together, which we think is just a no-brainer. So the AI era also demands visibility and analytics at scale. We talked about all the data that's being produced, right? All the data that's being produced that we want to be able to analyze, so ultimately we can start thinking about preventative security as an example. And as I mentioned before, whereas AI is only as good as the data, security is only as good as the context and the control surface it has. And we are lucky enough to have the world's leading platform providing security context, data analysis, and security operation actions in Splunk. And that is being dramatically expanded to look at all machine data so that we can train across that and start providing preventative capabilities. And so to tell us more about that, I'm very happy to announce to bring up Kamal Hathi, who is my good friend and counterpart of the Splunk business. Kamal. Here you go, bud.
Well, thank you, Peter. Thanks a lot. So, if you think about, not my name, but you think about this notion of agentic AI, what agents are doing is fundamentally changing how we work. Peter talked about the fact that literally we're adding orders of magnitude more people in the workflows. Literally, these are people. These are digital people who are coming in. And so all the data that you were collecting about how your employees work, the tools they use, the telemetry is coming out of them, is just getting more and more and more. And so the visibility required, the data magnitude required for agents and agentic AI is literally another magnitude more than you can imagine. And so what we need to do, if we think about what agents are doing and how they work with us, is that these are not just, in some senses, coworkers, but they're also adversaries. Agents and AI are not just in terms of helping us be more productive, but they're also threats. And so in order to understand what's happening, you need to have the totality of your system in a place you can understand. So data coming from a network, data coming from applications, data coming from IoT, data coming from pretty much anywhere you can imagine. And the scale of the data is so large, it's just not just extreme. We end up calling it ludicrous. There's no other way of describing it. It's a ludicrous amount of data. And so this is what you need to be able to work with. And not only do you have to work with it, but you need to be able to work with it at almost an infinite scale with very finite costs. And so the way we deliver this is what we call the Cisco Data Fabric. And Cisco Data Fabric, as Peter talked about before, is an evolution of the Splunk platform to give you this notion of a turnkey solution. You can just point data at it. It figures out how best to organize it. It figures out where to store it, how to route it, and it does so at a much more manageable cost. And the approach we take for that is this idea of data federation. Again, this is what Peter talked about, where instead, what we in the past always have done is said, get the data to Splunk, we'll ingest it. Instead, what we say now is we will take Splunk to the data, right? We will take the Splunk to wherever the data is, without copying, without moving. We will combine it, we'll federate it, and give you insights and understanding in a correlated, cohesive view that unlocks all the correlations across all these various places that you're collecting data from. Now, this is really fundamental. It's really important if you think about success in working with agents, agentic AI, et cetera. So it's something you really, really need to invest in. But that's not the only thing. It's just, in some sense, the beginning. What needs to happen once you have all this data together, it's unified, it's correlated, you really need to start thinking about how do you start looking at the events that are happening, the alerts that are coming in. How do you correlate all these different things and do it so proactively, stay ahead of it? And in some senses, you now start to think about how do you have your own AI that's going to fight the other AI? How do you fight fire with fire? In some senses, even prevent that fire from ever happening. And the key to this whole thing is this notion of machine data. So what is machine data? It is essentially telemetry. It's a data coming out of non-human systems. This is data coming from your applications, data coming from the network, telemetry that's coming from IoT, any kind of software system, your mobile phones. All of this is emitting telemetry that's non-human data. Now think about it. When you think about large language models, generative AI, ChatGPT, all these things you use, these are trained on human data. That's the language we speak, text, audio, video. But the petabytes and petabytes and exabytes of machine data that exists in your organizations is unused, is untouched for AI. So the critical part that you need to take care of, that we are going to help you do, is to take that machine data and train AI models so that you can stay ahead of these threats. So you can stay ahead of these incidents and start predicting when they're going to happen and not just wait and react to the problems that you see. So that's really, really important. And this is what the Cisco Data Fabric enables you to do. And that's why it's really, really important and critical as a very foundational, as a very important basic requirement to operate securely in this agentic era is to invest in this kind of a data fabric. And from Cisco is giving this to you with the Cisco Data Fabric. Now, what I want to do is, once we laid down this foundation, we talked about the need for a high-scale, intelligent, and cost-effective data platform, is talk about a couple of examples of how you might end up using these. So the first example I want to talk about is this context where sometimes, if not sometimes, oftentimes, when there's an incident, it's always the first reaction is, oh, it's a network, right? And someone's pointing a finger at the network guys are pointing a finger at the security guys, NetOps, SecOps, this is back and forth. And this lack of clarity is caused by silos of data. There are different places that you can see this. And so the example of that we've been working on is taking telemetry from Cisco Secure Access, taking telemetry from Meraki, and then using our XDI product to really unify in a fully automated solution correlative insights. So think about an example again with this. Let's say you have 20 different branch offices globally distributed, and because you understand the network structure, we can actually start to not only see what's going on, but pinpoint, in some senses, what IP address did this originate from? But not only that, we have a deep understanding of the network topology, and we can go all the way down to the serial number of the device and tell you what exactly is the offending device where the problem happened, and we can automatically shut it down by deploying remediations based upon this understanding. So this is really important, and it's only possible by this combination of Cisco and Splunk to give you a unified platform that's intelligent, it correlates, and is able to take action based upon these correlations. Another example where having this kind of a high-scale, unified, correlated data platform comes into use is when you think about an incident that unfolds and data is coming from all kinds of places. And the problem is not just having the ability to find the data, but to figure out what is noise and what is signal. So if you think about in this diagram on, I guess, my right-hand side, there's sources that are coming in. There's data from net flow logs, data coming out of applications, it's coming from cloud sources, and all of this has to be correlated into one cohesive view. Now, not only that, but as you look at the actual application, there's process-level data that you need to understand and get an idea of what's happening. In fact, as you go and expand the process tree, more and more information is flowing through, and you need to be able to make sense out of all of this, correlated all together. So what we do is we take advantage of isovalent, and this is what Peter talked about before, to get insights, not only that there is some traffic, what the traffic is, but have a process-level understanding of what is going on. And this is critical for two reasons. One, it gives us high-fidelity visibility, which is really, really important. But secondly, this is really important, that not only do we understand what's happening at a very basic detail level, but we can start to understand things such as what is signal and what is noise. We can intelligently evaluate at the edge, at the process level, whether this is an important piece of data or it's just noise. If it's important, if this is contributing, or we have suspicion that it's going to cause an incident, we open the spigot and we start flowing in this high-fidelity data. And now we can combine all of that together, federate it with Amazon Guard Duty. And as we do that, we start to understand what's happening, and ultimately, we end up at a place where we figure out that, in fact, what was happening is that there was some kind of lateral movement into an Amazon S3 bucket. So this is the kind of thing you can do when you have both the ability to look at data in detail, intelligently understand what is signal and what is noise, filter it out, combine it, federate it with sources of data that are not inherent to your system, and then you end up being able to take advantage of the kind of technology that only Cisco can do by the combination of Splunk, isovalent, and the rest of what we provide at Cisco. So it's another great example of why you really need to have this sort of a unified, cohesive, complete platform that Cisco provides. All right. Now, with that said, what we talk about, and this is really important, as you think about the sort of agentic era, in order to this notion that I talked about before, fight fire with fire, you really need to make sure that your analysts, your SOC operators, have intelligent agentic capabilities. And that's what we deliver, what we call the agentic SOC. And the agentic SOC really is all about three parts. Part one, which we talked about a lot, is this very comprehensive, cohesive, high-scale data platform that unites the data, unlocks insights, and allows you to make decisions. The second part is a comprehensive set of analytical tools, all the way from an XDR through threat detection, investigation, response, to a very, very high-scale, industry-leading SIM. We provide the totality of this. That's really important. And the third part, which is where the agentic pieces come in, is the ability to provide agentic, AI-driven orchestration, automation, and really assistance that allows your analysts, your SOC operators, not only look in the past, not only to be able to detect and respond to events as they happen, but even more importantly, to start to predict and prevent incidents and security issues before they ever take place. And that is what you can do by an investment in the Cisco Data Fabric and the rest of our security tools. And the way you can get at it, and I'm very happy to announce that today, right now, you can start to use all these things we talked about with the delivery of Enterprise Security Premier. This is a edition of Splunk that combines all the pieces I talked about before. It includes the Cisco Data Fabric, which is a Splunk platform, along with a rich set of analyst tools, and then a whole new slew of agentic capabilities that are human-led, so that they allow you to be in control. They work with your the way you like to operate, but they are highly assistive and autonomous in doing things like helping you triage alerts as they're coming in. They help you, detect and diffuse malware. There's an entire studio for threat detection and analysis and AI-driven management. And then if you want to be able to write SPL, which is a Splunk programming language, create runbooks in SOAR, et cetera, all of these things are AI-driven and agentically available to you to go and take advantage of Splunk Enterprise. So with that said, I hope this was of interest and you learned something of value there. My request to you and my sort of call to action, as I say, is important in any such presentation is you can go start trying it out now. Splunk Splunk Enterprise Security Premier. This is a thing that's available today, so please give it a shot. And thank you very much for your time. Back to Peter. Thanks.
Well,
Thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, we're about to bring it home here. So hey, don't leave yet. There's a reward at the end. Or you do leave, but you're going to miss a reward. So for those of you who are staying and being patient, thank you. So I am going to try to bring it all together pretty quickly because we're about time. So hopefully it's very, very clear we're thinking about things in terms of platforms and systems because the world is getting complex, these architectures are complex, the amount of visibility, the sensors, the enforcement points, the controls we have to have are very complex. And so by bringing them together as a platform, as a system, we can make them simpler to operate, we can put AI against them, and we can have greater outcomes as a result. And because Cisco owns the network, because we have these controls for enforcement across the network, across agents and identity, and because we have this analytics layer, we also think this gives us a unique ability to provide very, very unique outcomes. And the last thing I'll say is that if you can take nothing else away from this conference, I hope you see that Cisco is investing. Cisco is innovating. Cisco is on its front foot. And we're innovating to meet the moment from an AI infrastructure perspective, but also from a security perspective. And so we're super excited to work with you. Thank you for your time. There is a reward coming here in a second. So I can't compensate all of you for being here, but I can compensate 10 of you. And 10 of you, under your seats, have an Apple Watch. So take a look. And while you're doing that, I just want to say thank you so much for your time and thanks for being with us here at Cisco Live EMEA.